Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our second session in our series on issues that we face. I have finally figured out how to see comments live, so if you have comments, please send them over. I will read them aloud. I'll screen them, obviously, but if you have questions, prayer concerns, now I can finally see them. Yay! I finally figured it out. So, anyway, today our subject is Fatal Attraction. And what better story to discuss that than David and Bathsheba. So today we are going to be reading 2 Samuel 11. As always, we do have a couple icebreaker questions. So our first icebreaker question is, on whom was your first crush? My first crush. Well, when I was a real little kid, I said I was crushing on one of my mom's friend's daughters, who she was 8 years older than me. I doubt she returned that, but I claimed she was my girlfriend because she was a friend and she was a girl. It made perfect sense, right? But in terms of an actual crush, I think that would have to have been really my first girlfriend, Rachel. I fell pretty hard for her, but then again, that was in the 7th grade, and love like that is not meant to last, I suppose. But that's the first actual crush I can think of. What about you all? On whom was your first crush? Let me know in the comments below. Second question for icebreaking is, growing up, what is something you did every spring? Can't even say spring cleaning because I didn't really help with that too much. Mostly my parents probably sent me outside to play while they cleaned inside. There wasn't really anything that we did in particular every spring. We started wearing looser clothing, shorter sleeves, shorter pants. We had Easter break / spring break we had, and we didn't always go anywhere, so there wasn't really any kind of traditions for spring, at least to my recollection. I suppose technically it does count as spring. The island I grew up on had what was known as the Azalea Festival, but now is just known as Island Fest. It's just this solid weekend where we had a parade, we had different booths, games. Down by the airport we had on the island, there were rides set up. Technically it wasn't spring, even though it was the first weekend in June, so it was already rather warm. It was summer-like. It was technically spring. So something we did every spring would have been going to Island Fest, going to the parade, going to the fireworks on Friday night, going to ride the rides and eat the deep-fried Oreos and deep-fried pickles and all this really junky food. But that's really the only consistency that I can think of for spring. What about you all? Growing up, what is something you did every spring? Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, we will get to the reading. Again, we are in 2 Samuel chapter 11. Listen now for the word of our Lord. In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. And David sent someone to find out her name. The man said, "Isn't this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. She had purified herself from her uncleanliness. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David, saying, "I am pregnant." So David sent his word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent him to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were, and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace with all his master's servants. It did not go down to his house. When David was told Uriah did not go home, he asked him, "Haven't you just come from a distance? Why didn't you go home?" Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my master Joab and my lord's men are camping in the open field. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and lie with my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing." Then David said to him, "Stay here one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. At David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among his master's servants. He did not go home. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. In it, he wrote, "Put Uriah in the front line where the fighting is fiercest. Then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die." So while Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah at a place where he knew the strongest defenders were. When the men of the city came out and fought against Uriah, some of the men in David's army fell. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died. Joab sent David a full account of the battle. He instructed the messenger, "When you have finished giving the king this account of the battle, the king's anger may flare up, and he may ask you, 'Why did you get so close to the city to fight? Didn't you know they would shoot arrows from the wall? Who killed Abimelech, son of Jerubesheth? Didn't a woman throw an upper millstone on him from the wall, so that he died in Thebez? Why did you get so close to the wall? If he asks you this, then say to him, 'Also your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead.'" The messenger set out, and when he arrived, he told David everything Joab had sent him to say. The messenger said to David, "The men overpowered us and came out against us in the open, but we drove them back to the entrance of to the city gate. Then the archers shot arrows at your servants from the wall, and some of the king's men died. Moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead." David told the messenger, "Say this to Joab, 'Don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it.' Say this to encourage Joab." When Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. but the thing David had done displeased the Lord. This is the word of our Lord. Thanks be to God. Our first question in regards to the reading for today is, how do you feel about King David after reading this story? I'm understanding, hey, everyone makes mistakes. He reminds me a lot of today's politicians. You have to balance his successes against his failures. He was still God's anointed. How could he be a man after God's own heart or something else? I would say that my response is, how could he be a man after God's own heart? Yes, he makes a mistake. He sleeps with another man's wife. Essentially, he commits adultery. He causes her to commit adultery. He gets her pregnant. But rather than owning up to it, he adds insult to injury and intentionally has the husband killed so that he can take her as a wife. Now, granted, this is coming from a point of American culture, politics, kind of our current understanding of what should happen in this situation, but this happened over 2,000 years ago. This happened not only not in this land, it happened thousands of miles away, but it happened thousands of years in the past. We're talking about a different culture and a different time and a different place. So, possible that his having to take Bathsheba as a wife after what he did was part of the culture, part of what would be required of him to make reparations, for lack of a better term, for what he did. But having Uriah killed is adding insult to injury for sure. He is still God's anointed, yes. That has not changed. And, the comment, he reminds me of today's politicians. It kind of made me snicker because we think of politicians today as being corrupt, as being immoral. It's unfortunate, but there's a certain level of truth to it, so I could see that as a valid answer as well. But for me, the biggest one is, how could he be a man after God's own heart? He might be God's anointed one, but in no way is he acting in the way a man after God's own heart would act. That's my response, though. What do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. Number 2. What happens to David in this passage? He experiences several lapses in judgment. He is in the wrong place at the wrong time. He lets himself be controlled by his feelings. He let his power and success go to his head. His morality gradually eroded. Something else. I would say a number of these. The only one that I disagree with is him being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Definitely these are lapses in judgment. Sleeping with someone else's wife is a lapse in judgment. Intentionally having the husband killed is a lapse in judgment. There is no denying that he experiences several lapses in judgment. Definitely he let his feelings for this woman, his lust for her, control him. He let the power and success go to his head, particularly the power more than the success. He said, I'm the king, I can do whatever I want. I can have this man killed and no one will argue with me. So definitely his feelings got the better of him. His power got the better of him. His lust for Bathsheba got the better of him. His morality gradually eroding. That's an interesting thought. I don't know necessarily about it gradually eroding. I don't think his morality lessened, per se. It's just a matter of it got put on the back burner. His lust, his greed / power, his feelings for Bathsheba, they got in the way of his conscience, his morality. Otherwise, he is generally a very moral person, as we see. But it's not so much that he is less moral now than he was. Once this whole episode is done, he's still a very moral king. He's still God's anointed. He's still a man after God's own heart. It's just this episode that's more or less like the big episode where his morality lapses. But it's not so much eroded. It's not lessened. It's just put in the back burner, in my opinion. But that's my interpretation. Let me know what you all think in the comments below. Otherwise, we'll move on to number 3. What do you think was Bathsheba's involvement in the relationship? She seduced David by bathing where he could see her. David seduced her. She was a willing participant. She was forced against her will. She was an innocent victim who was used by David. Something else. On a certain level, I would say that she was a willing participant. But, I mean, that's only because we don't really hear about her resisting. It's entirely possible that David seduced her. It's also entirely possible that David used his power to use her for his own pleasure. That she was an innocent victim in all of this who was used by David. And it's that last one that I lean towards the most. She was probably seduced by David more than David was seduced by her. I really doubt she would have bathed where she knew David would see him. She wouldn't have any guarantee of him seeing her. So, there's that. And in my mind, David used his power to take advantage of her. So, she's an innocent victim. She is used by a person in a position of power, not just a man in a male-dominated society, but by the alpha, by the king, the head male, essentially. The one that all males bow down to, at least for their own good. She was truly taken advantage of, in my mind, and she knows she commits adultery, so she has that on her conscience. Her husband dies, so now she's mourning the loss of her husband. She's just more and more victimized as this story plays out in my mind. But again, feel free to disagree with me. I would love to hear your arguments. Let me know in the comments below what you all think. Number 4. At what point did David first cross the line and sin? When he didn't go with the army, like he should have. When he looked at Bathsheba bathing. When he sent someone out to find out about her. when he sent messengers to bring her to him when he slept with her. Not going out with the army is not a sin. That's a tactic. You protect the king. In a game of chess, you don't put your king all the way out in the open. You're putting pawns out there. You're putting rooks, knights, bishops. You're putting all of these, you're putting the queen out on the field before you're putting the king out there. So that was a tactical decision, not a sin. At least from my perspective, but I'm a little more logically minded, so take that with a grain of salt. His seeing Bathsheba bathing, that was coincidence. He didn't go out to see that. He didn't know that was going to happen. That was right place, right time. That was nothing more than a coincidence. In terms of sending someone out to find out about her, it's getting into a little bit of a gray area at this point, but that's not necessarily sinful. He's just finding out about her, getting information. For me, it's more when he sends messengers to bring her to him. Because at this point, he has intent to sleep with her. He hasn't done it yet, but he has already done it in his mind, which the Bible declares is a sin. You can sin with your eyes, you can sin with your mind, not just the physical action of adultery. And I see we have a viewer now, so hi, whoever you are, give a wave. But that's the point where I think that David first crosses the line and sins. Let me know what you all think in the comments below. Number 5, when do you find yourself most vulnerable to temptation? When I'm by myself? When I'm someplace I should not be? When I look at something I shouldn't? When I let my mind consider doing something wrong? Something else, or somewhere else, I guess in this case. I think for me, it's when I'm by myself. When I'm by myself, it's me and my mind. I'm not engaging in conversation with someone. I'm not, in a public setting. I would probably be in more of a private setting. So, at which point, my mind wanders. It doesn't necessarily always wander to naughty places or to committing sinful acts, anything like that when I am alone. That's not a guarantee, but my mind definitely wanders to occupy the time when I'm alone more than when I'm conversing with someone, when I'm out running errands and I'm out in the public sector. So I would say when I'm by myself, just my mind wanders when I am alone. So I guess both and for that one. What about you all? When do you find yourself most vulnerable to temptation? Let me know in the comments below. Number 6, what have you found to be helpful strategy for resisting temptation? Avoiding certain people, places, or situations, remembering God's standards, finding a positive diversion, calling someone as soon as temptation comes, praying as soon as it comes, something else. For me, finding a positive diversion. If I'm tempted to do something that I know I shouldn't do, obviously I've let my mind wander too far. I try to engage it in something else. So I'll read a book, start focusing on the story, or if it's nonfiction, on absorbing facts, things like that. Trying to improve knowledge. Or maybe I'll sit down and I'll play video games, engage my mind in leveling up or furthering the story. I'll watch TV, I'll watch a movie. I'll go for a walk. Take the dog for a walk. I'll just divert my attention from that negative thought, for lack of a better phrase, towards some more positive thought. What about you all? What have you all found to be a helpful strategy for resisting temptation? Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, we have gotten to the end of our session. If you all have prayer requests, please let me know in the comment section down below. I would love to pray with you all, for you all. Let me know how I can be of service for you. That is the end of our session for today, though. So I thank you all who are viewing this for watching. I will see you all on Monday. Until then, stay well, stay safe. God bless.